So welcome to everybody. And this is our third webinar. We have a webinar every quarter, but we've decided to have it every 4 months because we don't expect anything exciting to happen until May. So our next webinar is on Wednesday, the 11th of June. We try and vary the days and not let it clash with religious holidays. I haven't looked at the football games, I must be honest, for 11th of June. So let's hope there's no World Cup. I'm Bridget. I'm your host tonight. I'm the owner of Gateway Property Hub, and we've got several staff, and we do lettings, sales, investor sales, block management. But tonight we're talking about the letting side. We're going to do a lettings update and the renters' rights bill tonight. I'm getting a bit sick of this renters' rights bill, I must be honest. I wish they'd just put it through Parliament and get it over and done with, so I don't have to have webinars about it all the time. So type your questions in the chat. There's like a little bubble. Tap anywhere on the screen if you're on a phone, or if you're on a computer, you just have to click somewhere and you will see like a little chat bubble with 3 dots on the screen, and you can type it in there. A few of you have already sent me messages, so I know that's working. If we lose connection, just use the same link to join again. Mary had problems earlier with her sound, and she just logged out and logged back in, and then it all worked fine. If you can't hear me for some reason, just let me know in the chat, because I've got the wired one, so if I move too enthusiastically, I might knock it out. So my background, I was raised basically on a building site. My dad decided to build a house when I was a youngster. So on weekends, we all rode around on wheelbarrows and dug tunnels in sand. So I think that's where my love of properties came from. We eventually had a nice house, and then my dad decided to start digging a pool. And then when I grew up, I did exactly the same to my kids. So the poor things were always, the builders were having kids in wheelbarrows and going all over the place. So that is me. The business has been going for 20 years. And like I said, we do sales, lettings, block management. We do sales with tenants in situ. We do refurbs, and we do a lot of snagging inspections. And we help, if our landlords want to refurb their properties, we go and advise them and check that everything is going according to plan. Then we also have the landlord rescue service and the tenancy health checks. That is for landlords who do things themselves, and then they run into trouble. They might have forgotten something, or a portfolio gets too big and a landlord wants to move abroad, and then he contacts us and say, look, I need somebody to look after this, and then we'll investigate how well the portfolio looks, and we'll fill up the blanks. I know some of you have already spoken to me about that. And then we take it on, or we just do tenancy health checks for landlords. And most of you probably came on here via tenancy health check download. You might have the checklist already. Me, I've got about 30 years experience, but between me and the team, we've got 100 years experience. Most of us are accredited. We have anything from Marla, Arla, London Landlord Association, National Landlord Association accreditations. So we know about compliance. Lettings is not just a collect the rent and fix the boiler like a lot of people think. There's 179 pieces of legislation. So we've got a good mix of personalities in the office. So like Hema, who is very task driven. Kasia loves driving about and do viewings, and she's helping in the background there somewhere. And our property maintenance team are very compliance and task driven. So it's a good mix, because if I had to do it, I probably wouldn't be that good. We fix and renovate properties. And then let's go to the sales figures. So this is the annual change in house prices in Croydon. I'm going to use Croydon because I'm based in Croydon. We do properties Croydon, Bromley, Sutton. We've got a few in Wembley as well. Those are part of our portfolio landlords. This is a graph. This is not a price. This is the percentage increase or decrease. So when we had our webinar in November, it was sort of just crossing the 0 line. And now I see it's gone a bit up. I've made a little red arrow there, if you can see it. So The average house price in Croydon was £410,000 in December 2024. And it's gone up about 3.5%. So it's moving in the right direction again, because it did stand still for quite a while. Then we are looking at the change in rent. So this is once again a percentage. So be careful. This is not the price going up. It's just the change. At the moment, Croydon has dropped a bit. A few months ago, it was 10%, and now it's just under 10%, so 9.3%. So when we do rent increases, we do take that into consideration in how much has the rent gone up. And I'll show you some stats. So this is just a change in average rents by bedroom. So a 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, the top bar is the 1 bedroom, and you can see that one still has got the highest change in rent, which is a real pity for those poor youngsters that have just moved out of their parents' house, and now their rent increases are the highest of everybody. But I think that's where the highest demand is. So price normally goes where demand is. The average rental prices in Croydon, and I think neighbouring areas are not that different anyway, but London is obviously higher. 1 bedroom flats are about 1,200. 2 bedroom flats are 1,500 a month. 3 bedroom houses are 1,700. And 4 bedrooms to 2,500. We're thinking that the prices will stabilize quite a bit. The high prices have become the new normal, and hopefully tenants can stay paying their rent, because it must be really difficult. The list that you normally see of all the new laws is in a different sequence to the one we've got there. So normally they say abolition of Section 21, but I've sorted them into an order as the tenancy happens. Like the Section 21 is only right at the end when you want to get rid of the tenant. So I've taken it so that it follows a sequence. So hopefully you agree with it. Recent amendments, so a lot is happening at the moment. The Conservative government started talking about abolishing Section 21 in 2019, and then Michael Gove brought it to Parliament 2023. Obviously 2024 they had to cancel everything because the elections were announced. And then the new government has taken this up with great vigor, and they renamed it the Renters' Rights Bill. So from what it was the Renters' Reform Bill is now the Renters' Rights Bill. And that's just a bit scary, because on which side they are if it's Renters' Bill. Now I know we've got landlords and tenants and agents in this group tonight. So the key changes are that Section 21 evictions have been banned. Awaab's law, but I will go through everything, has been extended to private rentals. Rental bidding wars are banned, and rent increases are capped at market rate. Then the bill progress timeline. So it was introduced in Parliament by the new government in September 2024. Then it went through all the readings, January the 14th, January the 15th. So they moved quite quickly. Then the last one is the second reading on February the 4th. And the next step is to move to committee stage. And I think that's when it becomes really hotly contested. I just hope it does happen this time, because it's really had a huge influence on the market. It's a pity I forgot to upload the graph, but if you could see that when Section 21 was announced to be removed, the whole rental market dipped. A lot of people started moving from the market. Then in Scotland, where they actually physically did it, the whole market started going up again. But in England, where we've gone, oh, shall we? Oh, no. And then it's a new government. And then, so it's been hovering. The rental market just doesn't want to resuscitate itself, because it's just so much uncertainty. So I've changed the sequence of everything in sequence as the tenancy begins. So they said the recent amendments are not as scary as portrayed. We just think it's a lot of hype in the press, and it's clickbait, and they'll just grab one thing, I'll just say, oh, this is going to happen. And I think it'll just come down to understanding the laws and knowing your limitations and working with what you're given. And then hopefully we won't have this terrible shock The guarantors will change, and I'll explain that a bit later. Rent in advance will change. Bidding wars are apparently banned. I think one of the guys in Parliament probably had a bad experience when his child lost out on a property because of some bidding. And then superior landlords, which is this rent to rent scenario, and I'll discuss that later. And HMO licensing. I know there's some strict rules, so you have to really be careful. So meet our landlord. We're going to have an example landlord, Alex. And this is his house that he inherited from his parents, One High Street. And he's now become a landlord. And the first thing that he has to do is to register. Once this Renters' Rights Bill comes in, at the moment, we don't have this. So it is one day when we have this. So he needs to register on the landlord database and the ombudsman scheme. The landlord database is a database on which every single landlord will have to register. In Wales, they had a bit of a problem because a lot of people were not tech savvy, and letting agents were trying to help, and they couldn't really, because they weren't allowed to fill the form in on behalf of landlords. But let's hope we can help landlords who are not tech savvy to go online, even perhaps over a Zoom session and sharing screens. I don't know how we're going to do it, to register on this landlord database. And we think you'll probably have to upload your EPC, your gas certificate, your electrical certificate to show that you are compliant. Although you might not have a gas certificate yet, you're only just registering. You need to be on this register before you can even market your property. And Rightmove and the Zooplas of this earth will request you to provide proof. Letting agents like ourselves will have to have proof before we can market your property, because you can't let a property if you're not on that database. Then you'll also have to be part of the ombudsman scheme. The ombudsman scheme came about because us as letting agents already are members of an ombudsman scheme. So if a tenant complains about us, they go to our ombudsman scheme, and then the ombudsman scheme will mediate and see who's in the wrong and fine whoever is in the wrong. But the problem is, if a tenant has got a problem with a landlord, they can't come to the letting agents ombudsman scheme, so they are creating a landlord ombudsman scheme where tenants can complain about a landlord. And let's see what Alex is doing next. So he doesn't want to pay a fine, so he is registering on these. One thing that I was a bit concerned about when I saw this is that it may be made public for transparency. I don't know how that's going to work with data protection and all sorts. Because if I was a landlord, I would like my name, address, my property that I own, the EPC, the gas certificate, and everything on there for public scrutiny. Anyway, Alex, our example landlord, has joined these, and he's now looking at the decent home standards. This was previously only for the social housing sector. Since 2004, apparently they've had this. And now it's going to come into the private sector to improve quality. Once again, everybody that's on this webinar is probably a good landlord already, because otherwise you wouldn't be here. So it's aiming for those rogue landlords, but they're probably not going to even be on the database. Landlords will have to be proactive. So we are at the moment busy creating another checklist of everything that needs to be looked up there in this decent home standard, because there are quite a few funny little things in there that could worry us. And then the council will have enforcement on that. So the councils are given greater powers, and they are in charge of making sure this is enforced. So they're not going to wait for tenants to come to them and complain. They're going to proactively just test left, right, and center that your property is up to scratch. The homes that you're going to be renting out must have no hazards, damp, faulty electrics, poor heating, things like that. Kitchens must be under 20 years old, and bathrooms must be under 30 years old, unless they are still fully functional. That worries me a bit, but let's hope that unless fully functional, because my kitchen is way older than 20 years and still look good. Then they must have proper heating, ventilation, and safety features. So for instance, Alex, when he fixes up his mom's house, to get it ready for rental, You'll have to make sure that there are no trip hazards. There's proper extraction in the bathroom, extraction in the kitchen, so the mold is going to be the main thing. We've been on so many mold courses, it's coming out of our ears. And failure to comply will be a criminal offence, and councils will have stronger enforcement powers, including higher fines. I'm not going to mention what the fines are because they might still change, so I don't want to upset you. But one thing that's also coming, and I've put it here, you can see this little lovely EPC graph. There has been talk about the EPC band. At the moment, you must have a minimum of an EPC band E in order to even be able to let out your house. But they're thinking of increasing it to band C. Now, not many houses are going to make it to a band C, especially big old houses. They're never going to make it. And they're also going to change the way that EPCs are going to be calculated. So if you have got a property that's a band C and you think, oh yeah, man, I'm fine. Then when this new calculation comes in, it might be that the whole thing is a D again. And then you'll have to put insulated internal walls, all sorts of funny things. But we're waiting with bated breath. I'm going to play you a video of Emma. Emma is fixing up her house, and there's a short video. This is just so that I can take a sip of water.
Under the new Renters' Rights Bill, the Decent Homes Standard will be applied to all rental properties. And here is an example of how the government thinks it will play out. Visualise this. Emma, a landlord in Croydon, does an assessment on her rental property or receives a warning from the local council. She discovers that her rental property doesn't meet the new Decent Homes Standard. The issues: an outdated kitchen, a leaky bathroom, and poor heating that cause damp problems. To comply, Emma upgrades the kitchen with decent cabinets, better ventilation, and safer electrics. The bathroom gets a new toilet, non-slip flooring, and a heated towel rail. Once the renovations were complete, the council inspection confirms compliance. Emma can then register the property on the new digital database, ensuring transparency for future tenants. The results? No legal trouble, a more appealing home for renters, and better rent. Emma's property is now up to standard and more competitive than ever. Or will this really be the way things happen?
Next, we're going to have a talk by Kasia, who was too shy to come on live. And she kindly shot a video in our offices to explain about discrimination. So discrimination won't be allowed, and there's a whole raft of rules regarding that. I'm going to play her video.
Hello, my name is Kasia and I'm working with Bridget and Nehemiah in Gateway Property Hub. I would have to tell you tonight about discrimination. The Renters' Rights Bills are bringing new rules to make sure that all tenants are treated fairly when they apply for the property. It means landlord or letting agents can no longer exclude people just because they are on benefits, single parents, or having children. Saying no DSS, no children in the advert is illegal. It means that if we have to turn someone down, we have to have a clear legal reason, like overcrowding or income criteria. Just for example, we got a phone call, potential tenant married, is interested in one of our properties, she is a single mother on benefits. So at this point, we cannot say anymore that landlord does not accept people on benefits. That is discrimination. What we can do to treat Mary the same way as any other applicant, ask her standard question about incomes, expenses, and reference, just like we would do with or any other applicant. Let's say that Mary didn't pass the affordability check. We have to keep the clear record of why she didn't pass. If even landlord we ask, we have to let him know that she didn't meet the income criteria without revealing the personal details of single mother or being a person on benefits. Proper note protect us and the landlord from accusation of unfair treatment. We have to be really careful when we advertise the property. Word like no DSS or working professional is illegal. We have to keep the advert neutral, describe the property and the affordability criteria. So just for example, when the family with 4 kids wants to apply for the one-bedroom flat, can we say no to them? Yes, we can say no to them if they breach overcrowding rule, but the reason must be about the size of the property, not who they are. We can say that the local housing rules that not allow 5 people live in one-bedroom flat, but we cannot say that this property is not suitable for them. But there is a serious consequence. Landlords and agents can be fined up to £5,000 for the first offence, and then up to 30,000 for repeated offences. And if the rejected tenant decide to take legal action, it could mean compensation claims and damage reputation of the landlord. We check affordability criteria, not the personal details. We keep a good records and follow the same process for everyone. That's why we protect both tenants and landlords.
Discrimination, because some of you didn't see the video, basically what Kasia was saying, that on adverts and on the phone, you can't say, sorry, we don't accept DSS, and sorry, we can't accept kids. You get these tenants that call up and they just want to catch you out. So it's really important to train anybody that answers the phone to an advert that you might have, or an email that doesn't say no DSS or no kids. We've already started that now, so that it's just good practice. And this pet thing, that's not part of discrimination. So I just want to say pets are not people, so you can't discriminate against pets. But obviously, if a dog is a guide dog and you say, sorry, no pets, it's not a pet. It's actually an assistance dog. And if you discriminate a blind person because they've got a dog, then it will be discrimination. What you can say is you can say, no, sorry, your income is too low. So if somebody on housing benefit applies and their income from housing benefit or whatever, or pension or disability or whatever that all adds up to, and if that's below a certain criteria that your rent insurance need, then you can say no, but you just need to keep very good records, because if that tenant goes and reports you, you need to say, look, I said no because this tenant said they earned £1,000. The property's rent is 1,200. So how are they going to afford this? And then you can also say no for overcrowding. You don't have to accept, like for instance, Alex, if he gets a mother with on a housing benefit or universal credit, with 2 kids and a dog applying for his property, he can't really say no for overcrowding because he's got a 2-bedroom property. He could say yes to overcrowding if the daughter is, say, over 11 and the son is below 11, because apparently you're not allowed to share the same bedroom with different sexes. So you have to really look at the rules that the council sets and keep records. So if you say no to a tenant, just keep a record. One thing about discrimination, if the building head lease says no students, no housing benefit, then you'll have to just be careful. And they are eliminating those discriminatory clauses from insurance, out of mortgages, but it's just that will take time to filter through. Renting with pets is my favorite pet hate. I do like pets, but they do cause a lot of problems. So tenants must apply in writing. So when Alex, our example landlord, gets a application from Charlie, the single mother with the 2 kids and the dog, she must be upfront about this dog. And if he had a studio flat and she was applying for this big, say, St. Bernard's, imagine that in a studio flat, locked up while the tenant is at work for 12 hours, driving to work 2 hours, working 8 hours, coming back for 2 hours. That dog can't be left alone in a studio flat for 12 hours. So that's animal cruelty. But permission cannot be withheld unreasonable. We've got a lot of tenants who call us and say, oh, the new law says that you must allow pets. No, it doesn't say that. It just says pets cannot be unreasonably withheld, but it's not law yet. It's coming, but they already embraced it. So you need to keep records as well about your decision, so that if somebody goes and complains about you and say, oh, this landlord is discriminatory and he doesn't allow me, then you need to show and say, look, this tenant is at work 15 hours a day. She said she works. This dog is going to bark the whole neighborhood down. What about the neighbors' rights? And if the building says no pets, like we've got a few buildings, and David, you probably know, there are a few buildings that with lifts and like high-rise stuff, you can't have a dog on every level and them urinating in the lifts on the way down, 15 levels down. So those buildings say no pets. So tenants must apply in writing, and they will probably, we've already got like a pet passport that we tell the tenant to fill in. even send us a photo of the dog or bring it to the viewing so we can see it. But you can refuse it if you are allergic. Obviously, if you're an investor and you've got 30 properties, you can't say, sorry, no pets because I'm allergic. If you live there and you want to come and move back in there in the future, then that could be a good reason for you to say, sorry, I've got allergies, but it's not going to stand if you are an investor, landlord, and you're never going to move back into that studio flat ever again. One good thing that's coming out of there, because of the fee ban that came in a few years ago, we're not allowed to charge extra, but they're going to make a special compensation for the pet damage insurance. Landlords will be able to take out pet damage insurance on behalf of their tenants. I know we can insist on the tenant taking out pet insurance, but I think it's actually better if the landlord does it, because what if the tenant just stops paying? Then little Chihuahua chews away at the bottom of all your kitchen cupboards. And when you come at the next inspection, you've got no kitchen cupboards left. So if it's better that if the landlord has the pet damage insurance, but it's really difficult to get a product like that. We are going to our rent guarantee provider and we're asking if they will provide that type of service for us. We recently had 2 tenants moving in with cute little dogs that might be chewing on kitchen cupboards as we speak. We do ask extra rent at the moment, but because of the change in the tenancy, which I'll come to next, we can't charge extra rent mid-cycle. So for instance, if your tenant moves in and then wants a pet, you can't just up the rent by £35 a month because you can't change the rent. And the landlord can request a tenant to get rid of a pet if it's just not working out. But be careful of assistants, dogs and cats. Oh yes, Vidya said professionals only. That clause, sorry, you can't say professionals only. It just doesn't work. That is discriminatory. Let me just look at what other comments. I had a question here. What about existing landlords? Do they also have to register? I'll go through the questions in a minute, but I just saw this discriminatory thing. And Sarah, I see you've got specify student only. I don't think that is discriminatory. So the next section is the periodic tenancies. Now, this is a biggie. This is going to change the way we do business. And this is probably the most scary change. We think section 21 is, but actually this is going to take a while. It might be fine because a lot of our tenants live in our properties for 4 years. We've got tenants there for 13 years and it won't affect them. So periodic tenancies will replace fixed term ASTs. First of all, a lot of mortgages say if you're a buy-to-let landlord, you must have an AST in place. All those things will have to be changed because there won't be any ASTs anymore. ASTs will die a death. It will be called an assured tenancy. Now, section 4A, assured tenancy. Whenever you see an A, it's an amendment or something. What the big change is there, that you won't have a fixed term. So at the moment, we've got tenancies 12 months, 24 months. We usually stick to 12 months or 6 months, but it won't be anymore. Nothing will be fixed. It will only be periodic. In other words, Alex's tenant moves in on day 1 and she can give notice day 1 and move out 2 months later or 3 months later because she'll have to give a full 2 months notice. So she would have lost 1 day. So probably at the end of 3 months, she'll be able to move out. We don't have many cases like that anyway. Most tenants want to stay in their properties. Also, another thing is, and I made a video the other day for tenants saying, I don't think this renters' rights bill is really that good for tenants because they won't have a fixed term tenancy anymore. They won't be able to change their rent payment date. So if Alex's tenant called Charlie, if she moves in on the 1st of June and she gets paid on the 15th of June and she wants to make sure that every month on the 15th of June, her rent comes due, then he can't do that because he's only allowed to take 1 month rent max, not 1 month, 1 day. So he can't ask her to pay for 1 month plus the 15 days. So she'll just either have to wait to move in on the 15th of June, or she must just find the money somewhere on the 1st of June, 1st of every month and pay it because there won't be any deviation, because if you've got rent insurance and that tenant is 7 days late, then that's a bad record, and you need to report that to your rent insurance. Otherwise, it won't be valid anymore. Rent payments will be capped by 1 month, and you can't include any rent increase clauses. At the moment, some tenancies say the rent will be increased every year on the anniversary of the tenancy to market rents or by a percentage, or it will be reviewed. You can't do that. You can say nothing about any rent increases. We are at questions. So put your questions in the chat, and I'll also, what I spoke about earlier is that we've got our compliance checklist, which is a handy checklist for landlords, just to make sure, even if you've got a letting agent, it's quite good to say, okay, have they done this? Have they done that? Have they done that? I know a lot of you have it already, but I'm just going to put a little questionnaire up that will ask you whether you want the questionnaire. And also, we are offering one-to-one chats with me. If you want to book an appointment with me to chat about any of your properties, your portfolios, or any issues or concerns that you might have about these new rules or about existing rules or gas certificate that you might have forgotten, then just make an appointment and we can have a chat. Jocelyn, we've had a chat. David, we've had a chat. Chirag, we've had a chat already. Oh yes, one thing I forgot about this. I just didn't name it the right thing. It will be called a written statement. So included with the new assured tenancy will be a written statement. I don't know what it will look like, but it's going to be called a written statement. Oh, bidding wars will be banned. The next one, I'll get my colleague to speak about rent increases and how to do it. And let me just see here. So this is the compliance health check. It's got the name and address of your property, and then there's a tick list exercise. It's a few pages long. So if you want me to send that to you, you're more than happy. And then if you want to book a chat, take either a photo of it and book it. I don't know if you can still see the code. Let's go through some questions. So Ravi asked, what about existing landlords? Do they also have to register on the database, and by when? The database doesn't exist yet. The government is miraculously going to create this database within the next few months. I bet you they're going to announce it in May and say, oh, in September or October, it's all going to be rules. So we're going to totally ruin all the letting agents in the whole country's summer holidays. But we think that all existing landlords will have to register on there. They might just give them a bit more time. They might say, okay, all new tenancies from September or October this year will have to be on the database and have the ombudsman scheme. And then they might say all other landlords must be on it by December. Hopefully it'll give us a few months time to get our ducks in a row. I'm going to just go through the questions. I like that video that says no professionals only. That is so true. And then Sarah asked about, can you specify students only? It depends. If your accommodation is a student let, then that is a student let. It's like having accommodation in an over 50s or retirement building. You can't allow people with kids moving in there. So I don't think that is going to be discriminatory. What if tenants are self-employed and the only way to prove creditworthiness is to pay rent in advance? That won't be allowed. Sham, I'm really happy that you mentioned that. Normally when people have got bad debt, then they will offer to pay 6 months in advance or 3 months in advance or 12 months in advance. And then the end of that period, you find out they can't pay the rent either. And your rent guarantee insurance is basically invalid if they pay rent in advance. You can only take the legal cover. You can't take the rent guarantee cover. If a tenant is self-employed, they'll just have to work for 2 years and have tax returns, earn 3 times the rent, so we can take a rent insurance on them. What about tenants who pay weekly? I saw something about weekly, and that'll still be allowed. It's capped to a maximum of 1 month. And I think the weekly will still continue. Fiona asked, how can we increase the rent then? We'll deal with that in the next section, Fiona. Vidya asked, do existing ASTs have to be amended and reissued to existing tenants? So I think that if you, on the 1st of July, go into a new tenancy with a new tenant and you have an AST for 12 months, hopefully it'll honor the 12 months and only when it comes to the end of the 12 months, it will automatically roll over to a periodic. And then we might have to issue new documents, but the 12 months will be honored. We'll have to see how it plays out. Let's hope it's that case scenario. Then, would all contracts need to be renewed, and can the rent be increased prior to the new contract comes into effect? Now in Wales, they gave everybody a few months' time to issue new documents. So hopefully they don't dishonor our 12-month tenancies. And it's fine to issue new documents on top of the tenancy you've already got, and then let that new document take over at the end of it. So Angela, you say you also want a checklist and any materials we've got. We are working on a damp survey. I'll mention that again when we deal with RWAB's law. Juliana asked, if we cannot have a fixed term contract, can we not include rent increase clauses? What rights do you have to increase your rent on a yearly basis? We'll get to that. Hema will speak about that next. In the event you want to sell your rental property, do you go about vacating? We'll talk about that as well. And are you charging for chat? No, it's free. It's only 15 minutes. Normally, the last 15-minute chat was 41 minutes. So I don't know, I wasn't very good at timekeeping at that time. So it's free, and getting to know each other and getting to know your situation chats. Ruth says, I need to repair rising damp and cannot do it with a tenant in place. It is always so difficult. How do you go about it? The tenant is probably not very helpful and won't allow you to do it. Record keeping will come into it. I will discuss it under RWAB's law. Remind me if I forget. Fiona, no, I don't charge for my chats. I've got their tenancy checklist, QR code. And private landlords, do they need to be on the ombudsman already now? No, it doesn't exist yet. They don't even have a product in place. Hopefully it's going to be the same. I don't know. It'll be a pain to enter your details on one and enter your details on another. Perhaps you, on the database, you might have to register every property and you with the property, while with the ombudsman, perhaps you can have one policy for all your properties. I don't know. It's like a letting agent. We don't get ombudsman a scheme for every single property that we manage. We've got one ombudsman scheme and we pay X amount for how many properties we manage. So it goes up pro rata, so we do pay per property really. So Angela asks, does that also include landlords for student? I don't know at this stage. How do we get more rent and put it up? Will it be fixed now? No, it's not going to be fixed. I'm going to discuss how you're going to increase the rents, and we can still increase the rents. We've got different methods of increasing the rent now, and we will only have one method to increase the rent next. Make sure everybody pays maximum taxes. Yeah, Ruth, yes, they'll make money out of everything. The database will probably have to pay to be on the database. We'll probably have to pay to be on the ombudsman scheme. Nothing is for free. They'll make their penny and pound out of it. And is it advisable to use an agent for your property in Nottingham while living in London? Are you asking me? I've got this portfolio landlord who's got one or two properties in Nottingham, and because he didn't want to deal with any other letting agencies, that's fine. So we do make a journey up to Nottingham to go and check. Twice a year we go up there, we do the inspections, it's fine, and we've got trusted thing. But if you are a landlord and you want a property in Nottingham, I would highly advise that you get a letting agent. The next is my colleague Hema, and she's going to talk about the rent increases.
Hello everyone, my name is Gemma and I'm part of the Gateway Property Hub team. Today we are going to talk to you about rent increases and how it's going to affect the Renters' Rights Bill into how we do rent increases. There is going to be a few changes that you might want to be aware of, because obviously you need to comply with the new laws that are coming up probably by the summer. The rent increases, the first thing that we need to remember is that we need to do market research to find the right rent that a property in a particular area should be paying. you need to keep records of what kind of market research you have done, just in case the tenant appeals and this ends up in tribunal. You need to be able to prove that you have done the right market research. Once you have established what rent you would like to issue your tenant, you need to issue a formal document to them, and this has to be a form called Section 13. It's the only way you're going to be able to do so moving forward. Before, especially for private landlords, they might send an email to the tenants because they have lovely relationship. Moving forward, it has to be a formal document called Section 13, and that's how the new rent will have to be issued to them. Change number 3, the notice period to issue a rent increase is going from 1 month to 2 months, which means that if the rent is due on the 1st of January, you are going to have to give the notice by the 31st of October. So that will give us 2 months notice minimum. Another one that is changing is for all the old tenancies where there are clauses about rent increases, that is not going to be able to be used anymore. It's going to be void. And all the tenancies are going to become periodic, and they won't be able to have any rent increase clauses, which means that you can only issue one rent increase every 12 months. Once you have issued a rent increase and your tenant, for whatever reason, whether they can afford or they want to be difficult, they don't want to pay the new rent, they can actually go and appeal to the tribunals. And if the tribunal decides that it's not a fair increase that you are giving them for whatever reasons, they will adjust that figure to whatever they think is reasonable. And that new rent will only apply from the day the tribunal sets rather than the day that you issue Section 13. So you need to take into account that if the new date for the tribunal was the 6th of June instead of the 1st of January, the 12-month period will start from the 6th of June moving forward. So you won't be able to increase anymore till the 6th of June the following year. When there has been an appeal with the Section 13 that you have issued, you need to also be aware that the tribunals can no longer issue a higher rent increase from where you put your rent. They can keep it as you issue it, or they can lower it, but they are never going to go up, just to protect the tenants. Just to summarize, basically things to remember about the rent increases moving forward. You need to do your market research and document everything that you have done in order to get to the figure that you are issuing the tenant. Number 2, you need to do a formal document called Section 13 issued to the tenant with the new information about the new rent. Number 3, the notice has to be 2 months instead of 1 month. So please be very mindful with that. Number 4, you can only issue one rent increase every 12 months. So if you have any clauses on your current tenancies moving forward, all the tenancies will be periodic and you can only issue one rent increase per 12 months. For the private landlords, if you haven't got an agent or somebody that can help you with these rent increases and you are not sure on how to perform the new Section 13, etc., we offer those services just to make sure that you're keeping within the law. There will be penalties of up to £30,000 for landlords that are not complying with the new laws and regulations. So please be aware, be mindful, and if you are not sure, ask us. We can help you. Thank you for your time. And please, if you have any questions, go into the comments.
So that was Gemma. She does our rent increases, so she knows all about it. So going through the Section 13 notice, which is at the moment is in existence. I'll probably have to amend it a little bit. 12 months with 2 months notice. But the big thing that's going to come in is the delay that tenants will want to cause, because at the moment, if they go to the tribunal, then if the tribunal says the rent doesn't have to be as high as what the landlord suggested, then they backdate it to the date when it should have taken effect. With the new rules, it will only take effect when the tribunal eventually finishes. And at the moment, tribunals don't do many cases because the risk is there that they could say a higher rent. But with the new laws, it can only be the rent that the landlord suggests or lower. So then the risk to the tenant is nil. And so why not go to the tribunal? So we will keep you guys informed of any more materials that we get regarding all these things. So because you on this webinar, you will automatically get the latest updates. And the questions are great. I'm really happy to see so many questions there. And they are really in line with what we are focusing on. So during the tenancy, RWAP's law and the maintenance. So now we are during the tenancy because the rent increases, and also during the tenancy, RWAP's law. I just want to tell you about RWAP. RWAP is this little boy. He died. at the age of 2 because of bad mold in his flat, in his accommodation where he was living. The sad situation is that the family was from abroad. They don't know the English weather. They were probably put in a tiny accommodation, too many people, and they don't know about central heating, opening windows. Was it so cold outside? So Awaab's law is so that we keep better control. So Awaab's law is going to be one of our biggest problems, because currently what we're saying to tenants is, oh, it's a lifestyle thing. You're getting mold in your bathroom. It's a lifestyle thing. Because of Awaab's law, there are going to be maintenance deadlines. And those maintenance deadlines are, I've heard something like, you've got 24 hours to take immediate emergency action. You've got 2 weeks to investigate it and 7 days to action the repair after you've had expert advice. So we won't be able to use, oh, I'll just go and have a look. You need to send an expert because you need a report. You need to then decide what to do about it. If it looks like that, obviously that is major cleaning and major decontamination. But sometimes when you get to a property, there is a problem. I can remember just recently we had a problem. I went to a property and we saw this whole wall being dirty, full of mold. And we thought, oh, these tenants, they don't clean properly. But then actually, when they moved out, it smelled damp. And there was a huge leak underneath the bath that had been going on for quite a while and caused a huge amount of damage. It does need investigating. They wanting us as landlords have empathy with tenants when they say, oh, there's a lot of mold. We get only too used to saying, oh, I live in a moldy house. I live in a moldy house. The humidity in my house is astronomical. I live in a 100-year-old house and I've got no insulation whatsoever. But unfortunately, with rented properties, we have to take a lot more. Like Fiona says, the big problem, they don't ventilate and they dry wet clothes all over the property. So what can we do about that as a landlord? You have to perhaps provide a dehumidifier, extractor fan in the bathroom. I heard one of my colleagues recommend that we go through all the properties and you get to a property and the extractor fan is switched off in the bathroom because it makes a noise in the middle of the night. And the extractor fan in the kitchen, it uses too much electricity. So the thing going forward is to wire them in to such a degree that they cannot switch them off. The electrician will know where to switch it off if he ever needs to repair it, but the tenant doesn't need to know where to switch it off. He can switch it off at the mains if it causes a problem, and then everything will be in darkness. The switch must be accessible if somebody needs to work on it, and an electrician will know where to switch things off so he can work on it safely. So a tenant doesn't need to switch it off. Fiona, come back to you. You get these extractor fans that switch off when a certain humidity level is reached. So if you've got a toilet or a bathroom without an outside window and you walk in there in the middle of the night and you switch the light on, the extractor fan will go on for 5 minutes. By the time you get to your bedroom, 5 minutes is nearly gone. But if you have a shower, that extractor fan will keep on running until that humidity has been under control. So Awaab's law, they're going to have some strict deadlines. Hopefully they'll be reasonable. Contractors are going to be hugely important. You can't just send Joe Soap to go and check on this mold because he's not an expert. You can't ask him to write a report. It needs to be somebody that knows about it, that can give you a report and say, this is bad, this is good. So we'll be able to do that because we are busy training people up for that job, because there's going to be a huge demand for anything with damp and mold. So basically they recommend agents who have reliable contractors with the right liability insurance and stuff. And this is remote landlords should have a local point of contact for urgent repairs. Really important. That it is really important that you have local contacts and say, come on, Pat, go and quickly check what is going on there. There's a leak under the sink and it's dripping into the flat downstairs. The next section is more local council powers. The government is giving the local councils more powers, and the local councils are lapping this up. The fines are unlimited, or rent repayment orders of up to 24 months. So if they catch you, and you should have had an HMO license, and you don't have an HMO license, they can take that rent back from you for up to 24 months. Environmental inspections. Environmental inspector doesn't have to make an appointment like we have to. He can just rock up anytime and demand to see the property. The councils have been working on this HHSRS, health and safety regulations, which sort of links in with RWAB's law and the Decent Home Standard. They've got their tick list exercise, and if a tenant has reported you about damp, they will come to your property, and they're not just going to look at the damp issue. They're going to look for trip hazards, electrical safety, is there enough ventilation? So keep them out of your house. Don't volunteer for them to come into your house. They're going to be new grounds for opposition. I'm just going to quickly go through that and say, Section 21 is going to be falling away, and we're going to get to that in a minute. And everything will have to go through Section 8, and everything will have to go through the court. Don't know how the courts are going to cope. And they're going to be more mandatory versus discretionary. Mandatory is when the case gets to the judge. It's like in chambers. But if the judge says, oh, this and this, or like, for instance, the landlord wants to sell, it's a mandatory ground. If the judge gets that, he must grant it because the landlord wants to sell. He can't say, oh, but let's listen to the tenant's argument. Oh, the tenant can't find another house. He can't go down that. He must issue the judgment to say, you need to move out. And if a landlord wants to move in, that's also a mandatory ground. But you'll have to prove that you want to sell, and you have to prove that you are actually not just getting rid of the tenant and then letting it again. I think there will be a ban on letting it for about a year or something like that. I know one of my landlords here, their daughter wants to move back into the house, and that'll be a mandatory ground, but you can only use those ones after 12 months. Although this periodic thing, the tenant can give you notice after day 1, 2 months notice, but you as a landlord will only be able to sell the property after 12 months, and I think you need to give 4 months notice. So antisocial behavior, that will be, one of them will be mandatory and another one will be discretionary. Discretionary is when the judge can look at the situation. Criminal activity, that will be mandatory. So if the tenant is growing weed and you've got a police case, then you can actually kick them out based on that. It may take a lot longer because the courts are going to be overrun. There's not going to be any of these quick repossessions like with the Section 21, the fast track ones. Everything will have to go through the court. And let's hope they make it digital, because really it sometimes just needs a Zoom call. Or they don't all have to sit waiting for hours and hours at the magistrate's court. It's really ridiculous. And now we're getting to, it's got a dark cloud because most people stress up about this. Now, landlords can get property back if selling or moving back using the amended Section 8. But it's the end of Section 21. There will be no more Section 21. So if you want to get the tenant out because you just don't like them, or you want to fix something up, law must surely have a coping mechanism that if you need to fix something up that is a major works, they'll just say you need to rehome. It's not always possible to rehome a tenant while you're doing major works because you don't have a second property. We've had one tenant, we had to rebuild the whole bathroom. The toilet we had to put back in every day. We had to put a temporary bath in the conservatory so that they could bath for 2 months while we were rebuilding the whole bathroom. So you might just have to think creatively. Portaloo, Section 21 abolished, mortgage repossessions. So if your mortgage company wants to repossess, then they can just issue that tenant Section 8 mandatory. Okay. Then there's some others, rent repayment orders. That's in existence at the moment, but it's going to be a big thing. So if you are in breach, they'll say, sorry, landlord, you need to pay back the rent to the tenant. So the tenant is going to be very happy to report you for any breaches that you might have. Rental bidding is not allowed. I've never really had a problem with rental bidding. They usually try and get us down, but if you advertise a property at a certain price, you won't be able to accept an offer higher than that. So you can't charge £35 on top of it for pets. for instance. So you'll have to increase the rent that you advertise, and the advertised rent must be market rent, otherwise a tenant can dispute it. And then also there was a concern about increases. Will rents be capped was one of the questions that we had. And no, rents will not be capped. But if your rent is above market rate, that tenant that moves in has got 6 months to go and appeal the rent that you're actually charging. So they could move in very happily and then go through a whole tribunal thing to try and get the rent lower. And you will have to, you can't kick them out, because you'll have to go to Section 8, which you say, unless you're a minister or a mortgage, you want to sell it. So you have to be very accurate with your market appraisal when you market the property. You can't ask too much, because that might be appealed. Guarantor changes are coming, because at the moment, a guarantor is a guarantor for life. So if a tenant dies and he doesn't pay the rent, and you go, his next of kin haven't cleared that stuff, then the guarantor has to pay the rent. But under the new rules, the guarantor will stop being a guarantor when the tenant dies. But we haven't had many cases like that anyway. Superior landlord rent to rent. Now that is quite a big thing, and I don't think I've got time to go into it. If you've got a rent to rent, be careful, because suddenly you as the superior landlord will become liable for any rubbish that your person who's renting it from you and is subletting it to council or whatever reason, you will be ultimately responsible. So if they don't do the gas certificate because you've got one of these guaranteed rent, beware, you are liable. So it's very important to check up. Rent protection policies are really crucial, absolutely crucial. And you must make sure it's not one of these cheapy things that you get off the internet, because those only cover your rent when the property gets burnt down or flooded. It doesn't cover your legal expenses, and it doesn't cover if your tenant stops paying the rent, and it doesn't cover you that when you eventually have to get rid of the tenant and they leave it in a total mess, they will not, your rent guarantee will pay for 2 or 3 months at a partial rent if your tenant leaves in a total mess after you've evicted them. So it's really important. I'm going to play you a video of poor Alex, who we've totally forgotten about. A summary of everything that he's gone through with all the new laws.
The new Renters' Rights Bill introduces several new rules and regulations, which can be overwhelming. To simplify things, I've broken them down into steps based on the different stages of the property rental cycle. Before the tenancy, meet Alex. He owns a 2-bedroom house at 1 High Street. Like any landlord, he needs to prepare the house, find tenants, and set up the tenancy agreement. Step 1. Registering as a landlord. Under the new rules, Alex must register himself and his property on the Digital Landlord Database and join the Property Ombudsman Scheme. He also needs a valid Energy Performance Certificate, EPC, as properties below a certain energy rating cannot be rented out. Step 2. The Decent Homes Standard. Before renting out the house, Alex must ensure it meets the Decent Homes Standard. This could mean installing extractor fans, updating kitchen units, or fixing uneven flooring. He'll need to complete all necessary repairs before proceeding. Step 3. Advertising the property. Discrimination laws now strictly regulate rental ads. Alex cannot state no pets, no housing benefits, or no children in listings or verbal communication. Violating these rules could result in hefty fines. Step 4. Handling pet requests. While Alex can't outright refuse pets, he can decline them if the property is unsuitable. However, he cannot charge higher deposits or additional rent for pets. Instead, tenants must apply in writing, have pet damage insurance, and be responsible for any damages caused. During the tenancy, Charlie, a single parent with 2 kids and a pet, applies for the property. Due to poor credit, she offers 6 months' rent up front, but under new periodic tenancy rules, Alex can only accept 1 month in advance. Eventually, Charlie secures a guarantor, and her tenancy begins. Step 5. New tenancy rules. Fixed-term tenancies are now replaced by periodic tenancies, meaning Charlie can give 2 months' notice at any time. If Alex wants to move back in or sell the property, he must follow specific notice requirements. Step 6. Rent increases. Alex cannot include automatic rent increase clauses in the tenancy agreement. After 12 months, he can propose an increase with a formal Section 13 notice, giving Charlie 2 months' notice. If she disputes the increase, she can take it to a tribunal, which can only reduce, never increase, the proposed rent. Step 7. Awaab's Law, Property Safety and Inspections. Following a tragic case involving a child's death due to extreme mold, Awaab's Law mandates strict deadlines for fixing property issues. Alex must conduct inspections every 6 months to ensure Charlie and her family are living in safe conditions. If Charlie refuses access for inspections or repairs, Alex must keep detailed records as proof of his attempts to comply. When the tenant wants to leave or stay without paying, now Charlie wants to move out but doesn't want to give 2 months' notice. She might try to find faults in how Alex has handled things, looking for an opportunity to claim back rent since she can't afford a new deposit. Step 8. Strengthened council powers and rent repayment orders. Local councils now have greater enforcement powers, including issuing fines and rent repayment orders. Even after moving out, Charlie could report Alex to reclaim up to 2 years' rent. To avoid penalties, Alex must ensure full compliance with the law, ending the tenancy and regaining possession. Step 9. Eviction and possession grounds. If Charlie falls into arrears, Alex must now wait 3 months, rather than 2, before serving an eviction notice. Charlie then has 1 month to vacate before Alex can apply for a court order. Step 10. Section 21 abolished, no more no-fault evictions. With Section 21 abolished, Alex can only regain possession if Charlie breaches the agreement or under specific grounds, like selling the property. He must provide 4 months' notice and prove genuine intent to sell or move back in. After the tenancy, Charlie finally vacates, but the property is left in a mess. Luckily, Alex has rent guarantee cover, which covered his legal costs and gives him 2 months' rent while he fixes things. He also claims on the pet damage insurance and the deposit to cover repairs. Once the house is fixed up, Alex lists it again, and the rental cycle begins anew.
So there were a few things. At the moment, if you've got rent arrears, you have to wait for the tenant to be in arrears for 2 months. Then you serve them with a Section 8 for the arrears, and they've got 14 days before you can apply to the court if the tenant hasn't moved out. But with the new regulations, they have to be in arrears for 3 months, and then you have to wait. The tenant has got 1 month to move out after you've served them the new Section 8 before you can apply to the court to start eviction procedures. So we think that the rent guarantee cover is going to become more expensive because obviously those rent guarantee policies will have to pay out for extra months unpaid rent, or they might say we're going to only start paying from month 2, or at the moment they start paying from month 1 or 2, but they might say wait until month 3. But we'll see. At the moment, those rent guarantees are increasing slightly, but it's not too bad yet. I'll send you the link for that little clip for the Alex one. I can do that, yes. The tenancy health check. Anybody that still wants that, please just put it if you want that. If you want to book a chat, then click on that. I think Chirag, you were the only one that managed to do this barcode last time. So Fiona says, I'm selling up. Please repeat about selling in 12 months. So even if your tenancy is a periodic, the new stuff will be periodic and it's got no fixed term. If you want to sell up, you will have to wait till month 12. I don't know if you'll have to wait for 4 months before month 12 and then give them 4 months notice to then move out at month 12, or will you have to wait for month 12 and then give them 4 months notice that you want to sell and then they have to move out? Unfortunately, the council makes our lives very difficult by saying, oh, you need to prove that you are homeless before we'll rehouse you, and they'll make you sit and wait there until the bailiffs come. But that must be so stressful for tenants to have that type of situation. But that is what a welfare state does to people. I think if we just make sure that we're up to speed with all the laws and that we all get a letting agent. If you are not near your property, you need to get a letting agent to look after. They've got the contractors, they do the risk assessment. You can't have your contractor that decorates your house that climbs up a ladder and falls off it and hasn't got liability insurance. You need to get the right qualified people behind you. And we've got all those people already. The one about the rising damp and cannot do it with a tenant in place. Ruth, are you still on here? Do you want to explain what the story is? Ruth, you want to unmute yourself and just explain where is this rising damp? In which room is it?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
It's in the front room
Yeah,
because I had a professional survey done,
yeah.
and basically most of the damp was condensation. However, because the tenant called, environmental health says it's not. I called in a professional and a professional said it's condensation. So really and truly, environmental health, damp specialist, not so sure, but it's in the front room.
Oh.
And the company that did the survey said the only way they can possibly do it is by digging up, because it's the soil, something to do with the soil.
So this is like an Awaab's law situation, isn't it? So in
Yeah.
future, we will have to deal with this type of situation within 2 weeks plus 7 days to action it. You did the right thing by getting the survey done, but that you would in future have 2 weeks to do that. Emergency something, I would say send in cleaners with bleach and clean it. Buy a dehumidifier so that the air can stay below. Have a humidistat that measures it and make your tenant link it to their mobile phone and let them send you details every day or every second day. But does he have to dig it out from the outside or the inside?
From the inside, the house is 100 years old, which is quite typical of most of our English. So the rising damp is in the front room. They say they have to dig up the foundation, treat the foundation, and they can't do it with the tenant in place.
Yeah.
And the other problem is because I had grant to do up the house for heating, venting, and all that, but the tenant delayed in signing the form, so we were late for the grant. So basically, the funding didn't go through. I'm
But how
doing the
do you
best that I
get-
can.
But if the damp specialist doesn't think it is rising damp, why is he even bothering digging up the foundations?
No, it's just the front room where there is a bit of rising damp. But he said it's not as imminent as the rest of the condensation, which I was going to fix with the funding.
Yeah, try and get a few more opinions because not everybody's opinion is correct. And there might be ways and means of injecting things into walls. New technology arises all the time.
Just to say, it's because environmental health keeps saying that I have to treat that rising damp. Like you say, I probably need to get a second opinion.
I think get a second opinion because if a second opinion says it's not really bad rising damp, it's not nothing out of the ordinary. The UK is old, got old properties, and we've got a lot of moisture. And it might pay to start digging on the outside and getting the moisture away from the house so it can't rise. Have a bit of a look at that if you can't do anything. Thanks, Ruth.
All right, thank you.
Why, Mary, why are you saying Rentokil? Do Rentokil do rising damp as well? But Mary, what did you mean?
Yeah, Rentokil's a massive company that does all sorts like that. My properties have been treated with Rentokil. I have Rentokil insurance for rising damp and dry rot and fungus and things like that.
Yeah.
So whatever they need to repair comes under a 30-year insurance back guarantee. And the rest of the property then you can insure. For that lady who was on about the rising damp, certainly go to Rentokil for a survey. I had more than one property at the time. And they didn't charge me for secondary surveys. They charged me for the original survey and then nothing for the other because I had insurance with them.
Yeah.
They're a very good company.
Yeah.
Not cheap, but good.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay, thank you.
And then I know we've got, is Tembi still on the line? I know you've got a situation where you want your daughter to move back into your property and your tenant doesn't want to move out. It's very important you act now to get those tenants out. Mind you, if the new law comes in, it's mandatory. We need to speak to a legal guru and say, is it better to get rid of the tenant now so your daughter can move in, or wait until the new laws come in so your daughter can move in then? We've got an eviction specialist that we deal through. We don't ever work with solicitors because they are not experts. So on closing, so for landlords in Croydon, Sutton and Bromley, ensure your compliance to avoid penalties because we are obviously in those areas. Free downloadable booklet summarizing the bill, which I will send everybody that stayed till the end. Thank you for the questions. And if you got any further questions, feel free to email me and book a chat, really book a chat, because I love speaking. So I say goodbye to everybody and good luck with all these news laws. Our next webinar is on the 11th of June. So I'll send you all invites again. And let's hope we can talk about something else for a change, because I'd love to add value to our property investments instead of just talking about the doom and gloom. Contractors are just so important to have, and we can do rent increases and surveys and everything. So we really look forward working with everybody that was on the webinar tonight. Goodbye. Thank you. And sorry I've overrun.